Hello, colleagues. Today we are going to cover a couple of Excel topics, notably some tax accounting issues, as well as how to make Excel curse aloud, because those two things go together really, really well, I think. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen and at the same time share my content, and hopefully this will all work great. So in a second, hopefully you will be seeing my basic default background screen. Okay, good. And I really want to emphasize this point because we're talking about tax issues. I am not an accountant. I'm not a tax professional. I'm not an attorney. So please don't take any of this as tax guidance. In fact, the safest course of action is to turn your sound to mute, turn your laptop off, and beat it with a hammer so that you don't get misled by what I'm about to tell you. So I'm going to go through three topics, and we'll toggle over in a second. And if time goes quickly, I have another thing that I'd also like to show you that's unrelated to this content. So let's move this out of the way. And this is more or less what I did for myself. I think, Justin, you're aware, I actually only started freelancing last year. And so as I got into it, I realized, oh, I might pick up some additional clients, and I certainly better be prepared to pay taxes. And so as I got into it, I built myself a little ledger just to track things as time went on. And let me hasten to say, these are not real numbers, so please don't think this is the amount I earned or paid in taxes. I randomized things, and also I changed the initials of my clients, their businesses. But fundamentally, what I wanted to do was have a single place where I could go keep track of income as it's coming in, expenses, which in my case are very minor since all I sell is my knowledge, and then keep track over time of my tax liability so that I could make my quarterly payments and not go to jail. So I actually didn't start until May of last year, and this built up over time. It's not like day one I came up with this. It took a while to realize I'd need to do it, but over time. So as things roll in, I try to record. I try to record them. I'm sorry, did you have something to say, Justin?
I have a question. Is this a report I can get from QuickBooks?
That's a great question. I use
Sounds like a P&L.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. QuickBooks is much more robust in terms of this sort of thing than my simple Excel spreadsheet. I'm fortunate in that, you know, I in a busy year, I might have 60 total transactions. I don't sell. All I do is issue monthly invoices. I have some monthly expenses. I pay taxes. So my financial picture is very, very simple compared to those of you who have many clients, or you have things with cost of goods sold and you're selling lots and lots of strawberries, for example. Then you'd have a much more complex picture, and Excel might not be the right choice, especially for this sort of a view. But you're exactly right. QuickBooks probably offers a similar sort of thing, because this does feed into or reflect your financials, the kind of things that QuickBooks would capture. So with that, and I'm not going to go into detail other than say I'm just trying to track things over time, as well as have a few reminders for myself. So each of these line items is either an income item or expense item, or in some cases just an item to remind me to do something, so that I don't, I have it on my Google Calendar as well, but certain things you don't want to miss, and paying taxes is one of them. And so the very first one, I bought myself a URL last year, and it was actually an expense item. And so when you think about the tax consequences of that, it's actually a tax benefit. I wouldn't be able to claim this in excess of zero, but if we're accumulating our tax liability over the course of the year, we want to record this too, because at the end of the year, I'm going to write expenses off of my income to the extent I can. So in this case, I actually record a positive liability. And you can see the formula is very simple. I'm just adding up income and expenses. It's important to keep the sign correctly, right? So income's positive, expenses are negative. And I'm using a tax rate of 30.5%. And I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, where that came from. I would encourage all of you to understand what your total tax rate looks like. In this simplified example, I'm just combining everything into a single average tax rate. In reality, though, right, you're going to have your federal income tax, you're going to have self-employment tax, you're going to have state tax, and possibly some other thing. So Those are the first three rows. And then I just have a column in which I kind of accumulate my tax liability. So at the beginning, I have, I'm actually ahead $29.22. And off to the right, we're not going to go into it, but I keep some additional info. So places where I have receipts, just so 5 years later, if the IRS comes a knocking, I will be able to easily go figure things out. The next one would be an income item. So now we have an actual tax liability, and our ledger, our ongoing tax tracking in this column then starts to get negative. So at this point, I owe $343. On the 12th, I knew that I had a payment due on the 15th. So I made a payment of $344, which then reduced. Now I'm ahead on my taxes by 81 cents. So that's fundamentally how this works. I wanted something where during the course of the year, I could start to track as payments came in or as I had expenses, I could track kind of what my expense liability would be, so that when my quarterly payment came up, I'd at least have money set aside to be able to make it and have a pretty good sense of how much it was going to be. Fair enough. And so this goes on throughout the year. And as you folks probably know, because you're more advanced than I am, your final estimated payment doesn't actually occur until into the following calendar year. But again, at the end of the year, at least I have a sense of how much approximately that payment might be, and I can go ahead and make it at the appropriate point. So this is kind of the first step where I'm just going through, I've got a little ledger, I'm tracking things. In reality, well, so here, I did record some other things that don't have a number associated with them, right? When I get my EIN, when I got my articles of organization, that sort of stuff as well. And hopefully this, again, I'm a single member LLC in North Carolina. Hopefully this allows me to demonstrate, if I ever asked, that I'm operating my business as an independent entity, that I'm keeping minutes and notes of my decisions. It looks like a real business because I'm treating it like that. So I'll stop for just a second before we go on to the tax page. Any questions up to this point? No? Okay, cool. And again, I'm not suggesting anybody use this template, but this sort of thinking might be useful to you if you're not using your own tax professional. And again, I encourage you to do so. Just because I don't doesn't mean you should. One other thing I'll point out is I also include all my clients. I have initials for their names. And again, I've changed that as well. So I can use at the end of the year, or say over 3 years, if I had the same clients, you could start to do analyses against them. And I might say, oh, client SB, they've been really good. I've made a lot of income with them. Or client ZK, it's been a long time since I've done any work. I should reach out to them. And again, this is all very simple, very basic. Now we'll go on to the next page. Excuse me. Once
I
again,
like it because QuickBooks doesn't show my tax liability.
yeah.
It doesn't show me how much I owe quarterly.
Okay. Yeah. And for all of us, it's going to be different. Certainly, I have income outside of my little freelancing gig, which also affects my tax rate. So it can get complex, but we're looking at a kind of a simplified example just to try to think things through. And to be honest, this is more a recap of what I had to do for myself, just trying to understand how taxes worked. So at the beginning of 2022, I received 1099s from those 3 hypothetical clients with these 3 hypothetical sets of income. And for those of you familiar with SumIF, in this case, I actually just pulled it off that ledger sheet, but you're going to get a printed 1099 NEC if that's the way you do business. And you just enter the numbers here. You come up with gross business income. I had a modest amount of expenses. For the purposes of this example, I cleaned everything up. In reality, I had some reimbursed expenses and some non-reimbursed expenses. So I sort of had to tease those apart. Because if I got paid for something and it was a reimbursed expense, it would have a different impact on my tax picture. So for this, we're keeping it nice and clean. So this hypothetical business, 86K in income, 1,300 of expenses, leaves net business income. And off to the right, you're going to see, I did some numbers here because I was sort of curious in reality what some of the actual tax rates might look like. And so there's some numbers in blue off to the right. Don't pay a ton of attention to them unless it's something that's closely related to how you're doing business. But I went through the tax forms, and again, new to this, I didn't know how it works. So I actually had to go through the tax forms and sort of step by step figure out how some of these work and just put them in Excel. And I encourage you to do the same. If there's tax forms that you know you're going to have to fill out at the end of the year, and they might affect something you're going to do during the course of the year, it's a really good idea to try to estimate in advance what that's going to look like. So here's some of the calculations, and I'm not going to go through them in detail. I don't know how the IRS came up with all of these, but we just follow the rules. So, we take 92.35% of our net business income. We find that, and that's a figure that's used a lot. So there's, a couple of elements to self-employment tax. Again, as you folks know better than me, because I never had to pay this until this year for the first time ever. But you can go through and start to calculate what some of these things look like, both in terms of how the IRS thinks about it, and you can calculate the numbers themselves. I put some notes here for myself. So as I was thinking forward about my taxes, I'd be ready to know what's going to affect me and how much. And so some of these got really a little bit complex, because you never know if it's going to be a top line deduction, if it's going to be something from AGI. So here we're just going through and just doing straightforward, very basic calculations, which often feed right into your tax returns. And as a single member LLC, all of this just goes through to my personal income taxes. So it's a little simpler. I have to file additional forms, but at the end of the day, I'm not paying separate taxes. It all just flows into my personal tax return. And so here's a few more of the calculations. A quick look at the qualified business income deduction, just because my silly little business checking account and savings account earned a tiny little bit of interest and dividends. So again, we never lie to the IRS, no matter how immaterial the amount is. So went through and figured that, and then started figuring out the actual amount of tax. And so at the end of the year, this was the amount of marginal tax I had to pay. And then when I total all these things up, and so this is these three things together, the two self-employment taxes plus my marginal ordinary income tax, that amount was here. And what I found was that it turns out to be around 30.5%. And so that's important, because initially I was thinking, oh, I really should be safe. I should do estimated rates of like 22% for ordinary income, add in both sides of the self-employment tax, plus the 2.9%, plus the North Carolina tax. And so it turned out to be a little less expensive than that, which is a good thing. And again, if you've never really thought much about your taxes, always pay attention to this notion of the fact that you have you're in a marginal tax bracket for the upper end of your income. That's not the same as the total average tax. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think Ian has a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you just step back a sec? I'm not from the States, so can you just quickly, I'm hoping it's quick, is just tell me what a 1099 NEC is?
Yeah, so I think they used to be, it was a 1099 something a couple of years ago, and they just changed it. But fundamentally, it's non-employee compensation. And so I'm an independent contractor. And so at the end of the year, my clients issue a 1099 NEC to me and to the IRS, critically, that describes my business, my social security number, or my EIN, which is how the IRS sometimes tracks businesses, any taxes they paid, which are none. So I need to know this and report it to the IRS, because it's the fundamental starting point for my tax liability.
That's the LLC, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, it gets complex because I'm a single member LLC, and there's lots of different kinds of business structures.
Yep. Okay. I got it.
All right. Cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
No, great question. And again, I apologize. Sometimes I get, in the US, we get a little bit US centric. So thank you for a very good question.
But no, I'm moving into the States. That's why I'm curious to find out a bit more about all these details, right? So.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Welcome. Glad to have you with us when you make it. Something I'll probably do in the future is I'll spend a little time on looking at income tax brackets, your marginal rate versus your average rate, because it seems like a lot of people have questions about that or get confused. They think, oh, you know, I've got $80,000 of income, but if I take on another client, my tax bracket's going to increase, and the net effect, you know, I might earn $20,000 more, but then it's all going to be taxed at 22% my entire income. And that's just not the case. So I'll probably do a non-H7 quick video and slap it up on YouTube just to show that, you know, your tax rate is not nearly as high as most people perceive it to be. Okay, now let's go on to the important part, which is the cursing in our last 4 minutes. And something I recently learned is I'm now using Mac for Excel on a MacBook, and I used to be using Excel on a Windows machine. So the way you do this is a little different. And so let's see, who do we have today? Let's just do Justin. So we're gonna put Justin's name. And so this is a fun, and again, there's almost no practical application other than to annoy your spouse or children, but there are some accessibility tools built into the Microsoft suite as well as into the Mac OS that allow you to do something fun. And hopefully this will work. And I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it because I've never done this with other people, but let's just give it a shot and see what happens. Okay.
Damn it, Justin, you paid $25,837 in taxes last year.
Okay, did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I'm broke. I paid taxes on 3 times my income.
Yeah, or you know, we could easily, you know, when Ian moves here, he's also going to be able to complain about
Damn it, Ian, you paid $25,837 in taxes last year.
Oh, thank you, Ian. We're glad to have you on our side of the border, helping support the tax base. So the actual cursing aloud, that's just kind of a parlor trick, but something that is a little bit more useful in here. And I don't know, and I know, Justin, you've got some Excel experience, and I imagine you do as well, Ian. But there's a couple of fun things that we're doing in this. One, we're using concatenation, which allows you to put pieces of text and constants and formulas together into a single cell formula and have a result come out. So this is actually some text. It includes a cell reference, which is where I typed in Justin or Ian. It includes another cell reference, which is that total amount of tax we paid back on the other sheet. And something important, if you're going to do things like this, or if you're going to put cell labels in charts, often this result probably has a whole bunch of decimal points. And so if we didn't clean this up, it would show something fairly nasty. In fact, I'll just try to do this real quick, and we'll see. Hopefully I can get this to work without too much work. Let's cross our fingers. Okay, so here's what it would look like if I didn't take that result and wrap it in a dollar value. And you know, if we read this rascal aloud.
Damn it, Ian, you paid $25,836.73744 in taxes last year.
Yeah, so using things, just Control Z that out, using things like the dollar function, or especially the fixed function, is a great way to truncate all those extra decimals when you want to do a silly thing like speaking stuff aloud, or a more useful thing like displaying values, especially when you're doing concatenation, because it won't automatically truncate, and you can't do cell formatting to clean things up, or if you're going to put values in a chart. Also, so down here, this is again a recent learning. On the Mac side, it's actually a Mac OS accessibility feature, so you can easily enable that if you wanted to. If you're a Windows user, the thing you just need to know is speak cells on enter. If you go Google speak cells on enter for Windows, it'll show you how to go through and set things up, so you can speak things aloud. So that's kind of our end of our content for today. I'll click stop sharing for just a moment, and here we are back again. All right, Ian and Justin, any questions, comments, concerns? And again, I've not put this in front of like my actual a tax accountant, so I could be doing things wrong. I may be in jail in a couple of weeks, but this is what I've got at the moment.
Cool. Cool.
I'll vi-
I-
I'll
I-
visit you.
Go ahead.
I'll visit you in jail.
Yeah. Okay, I'd appreciate that, or at least,
That's
you
how
know.
far H7 goes.
No, I'll zoom in. I'll have different topics than before, like, you know, good books to read and things to not do in the showers. So with that, I guess we'll close and return to the main session. So have a great day, everybody, and may you excel today. I guess that will be our closing.